You had a great game against the Bullets, and Bird didn't like what all was written in the paper the next.
Well, what happened? And Larry comes in and throws the newspaper down on the coffee table in front of me. He says, "Do you see this BS?" And I picked up the paper and it had a picture of myself, and it said, "Wedman leads Celtics past Bullets." And Larry said, "This will never happen again. This is my team."
That's my team.
Yeah.
Scott Wedman names 5 NBA players he absolutely hates. Not dislikes, not respects from a distance, hates. And one of them was his own teammate. This is not about jealousy or pettiness. This is about the raw, physical, psychological suffering that these 5 legends put Wedman through during the most brutal era in basketball history. Some of this hate was born in practice. Some came from finals losses. Some came from pure exhaustion. By the end of the story, you will understand why hate was the fuel that turned a bench player into a champion. Let's start with the most personal rivalry on the list. Larry Bird. Yes, Larry Bird, his own teammate, the guy he won 2 championships with. Wedman arrived in Boston in January 1983 as an established all-star. He had averaged over 16 points per game with Kansas City. He was a lethal shooter. He expected respect. What he got instead was a cold locker room, and Larry Bird treating him like fresh meat. No one in that Celtics locker room welcomed Wedman with open arms. Minutes were sacred. Hierarchy was absolute. And Bird was the alpha who decided whether you survived or quit. Bird immediately started testing Wedman. He attacked him relentlessly in practice. He talked trash. He tried to show him up. Wedman was not used to this type of environment. He had been a star. Now he was a sparring dummy for the most competitive maniac in basketball. Bird did not care if it was a Tuesday scrimmage in February or Game 7 of the finals. Every practice was war. Wedman later admitted it was hard to play with Larry Bird, initially. That word, initially, carries a lot of weight. It means Wedman had to earn his place through suffering. But the psychological warfare went deeper than basketball. Wedman was a vegetarian in an era of steak and potatoes. He lifted heavy weights and earned the nickname the Incredible Hulk back in Kansas City. Bird and Kevin McHale teased him mercilessly about his diet. They mocked him publicly. In the hyper-masculine world of an NBA locker room, Wedman's discipline was treated like a weakness. Bird made sure everyone knew Wedman ate rabbit food. This was not just hazing. This was Bird's way of breaking down anyone who did not fit the mold. Wedman had to defend his lifestyle against the sharpest tongue in basketball, while also fighting for playing time. The hate was exhausting, but it worked. Bird pushed Wedman to the edge every single day, and Wedman eventually earned his respect by refusing to quit. The defining moment of their relationship came during a charity 10-kilometer race in Boston. Wedman was an endurance enthusiast. He trained with precision. He entered the race along with his instructor and Larry Bird. Bird was not a distance runner. He joined on a whim. For the first few miles, they jogged together at a relaxed pace. Spectators started shouting, "Hey, I'm passing Larry Bird," as they ran by. This was innocent fun. But for Bird, it was a trigger. With 1 mile left, Bird turned to Wedman and said, "That's it. Nobody else is passing me." Then he sprinted. A dead sprint. He left Wedman and everyone else in the dust. Wedman later said this was the moment he saw Bird's true competitive nature. It was terrifying. You hate someone like Bird because he refuses to let you be comfortable. He forces you to compete even when you are just trying to run a charity race. This is why Bird heads the list. He made Wedman's life miserable every single day, and it made Wedman a better player. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to this channel. We are breaking down the untold stories of basketball's greatest era. Drop a comment and tell me, who is the one player you would hate to guard in practice every single day? Now let's shift from psychological abuse to physical punishment. Moses Malone. If Bird was a tyrant teammate, Malone was a force of nature. Wedman faced Malone during the 1981 Western Conference Finals when Wedman was still the star of the Kansas City Kings. This series does not get talked about enough, but it was one of the most physically punishing matchups in playoff history. The Kings were a finesse team. They relied on passing and perimeter shooting. The Rockets were a sledgehammer. They relied almost entirely on Moses Malone's ability to miss a shot, grab the rebound, and score anyway. Malone was relentless on the offensive glass. He averaged over 27 points and almost 15 rebounds per game that season. Guarding him, or even being near him in the paint, was a health hazard. Wedman's hate for Malone came from the sheer futility of trying to stop him. In Game 4 of that series, Wedman scored 16 points. That was respectable. But Malone exploded for 42 points on 16 made field goals. The Rockets won the series in 5 games. Malone was unstoppable. It did not matter how well Wedman shot the ball or how disciplined the Kings played defense. Malone would simply outwork them. He was a machine designed to wear opponents down until they quit. What made this even more frustrating for Wedman was that he had done everything right. Remember, Wedman was called the Incredible Hulk because of his weight training. He was physically stronger than most wings. He had a dense, muscular frame. He survived a car accident where his Porsche split in half and walked away relatively unscathed. His strength was legendary. But against Moses Malone, none of that mattered. Malone tossed him aside like he was nothing. This is the hate of a man who prepared perfectly but still got dominated. Wedman lifted heavier. He conditioned harder. And Malone still destroyed him. That kind of physical mismatch creates a deep resentment. You hate the player who makes your preparation feel worthless. Now let's talk about the small forward gauntlet. Wedman once said he welcomed the challenges of playing guys like Marcus Johnson, Julius Erving, and Jamal Wilkes. He called them the better small forwards in the league during those years. Welcome the challenge is a polite way of saying these matchups were the bane of his existence. These three players represented the gold standard of the position, and each one tortured Wedman in a different way. Start with Julius Erving, Dr. J, the face of the league before Bird and Magic took over. For a grounded, technical defender like Wedman, Erving was a nightmare. Wedman was textbook, feet on the ground, chest up, strong base. Erving was an aerial artist who could change his shot in midair. Hating Erving was a natural reaction for any defender who had to watch themselves get dunked on in front of a national audience. Once Wedman joined the Celtics, the rivalry intensified. The Celtics and Sixers hated each other. The Eastern Conference in the 80s was a bloodbath between these two teams. Wedman's role off the bench often meant coming in fresh to guard Erving. This was a thankless task. If you stopped him, it was expected because you had fresh legs. If he dunked on you, you became a poster. The hate here was the stress of constant vigilance. You could never relax against Dr. J. One lapse in concentration and you ended up on a highlight reel for decades. Then there was Marcus Johnson. People forget how terrifying Johnson was in the early 80s. Under coach Don Nelson, Johnson pioneered the point forward concept. He had the size of a power forward but the handle and vision of a point guard. Wedman hated guarding Johnson because Johnson inverted the defensive geometry. If Wedman pressed up to deny the shot, Johnson would drive past him. If Wedman sagged off to prevent the drive, Johnson had a lethal mid-range game and elite passing vision. The Milwaukee Bucks were the third power in the East. When they met the Celtics in the playoffs, these series were more physical than the Lakers games. Johnson was constantly moving, constantly initiating contact, constantly creating mismatches. The hate derived from pure exhaustion. Guarding Johnson meant chasing him through screens and battling in the post for 40 minutes. It was grueling. What made Johnson especially maddening was that he never stopped talking. He was not as loud as Bird, but he was just as relentless. He would tell you what he was about to do, then do it anyway. That is a special kind of torture. You know the move is coming. You prepare for it. You position yourself perfectly, and he still executes. Johnson had that rare combination of size, skill, and basketball intelligence that made him impossible to solve. Every possession felt like a puzzle with no answer. By the fourth quarter, you were mentally drained just from trying to predict his next move. That mental exhaustion was worse than the physical toll. Wedman hated that Johnson made him feel like he was always one step behind. And then there was Jamal Wilkes, nicknamed Silk. Jamal Wilkes might have been the most frustrating player on this entire list. He had one of the ugliest jump shots in basketball history, a slingshot motion that started behind his head, but it was mathematically precise. Defenders hate players like Wilkes because their game defies logic. You play perfect defense. You force him into what looks like an awkward, contested shot, and he banks it in. It is demoralizing. As a Celtic, Wedman faced Wilkes in the highest stakes games imaginable. The Celtics versus Lakers matchups. Wilkes was the third scorer on the Showtime Lakers. While everyone focused on Magic and Kareem, Wilkes would quietly drop 25 points. You could not bait him. You could not intimidate him. You just had to suffer through his consistency. The hate was for Wilkes' unflappability. No amount of physical play disturbed his rhythm. Watching that ugly shot go in over and over again broke defenders mentally. But if there is one player who symbolizes the ultimate rivalry for Wedman, it is James Worthy. Big Game James. The hate here is defined by the 1984 and 1985 NBA Finals, specifically by one game, the Memorial Day Massacre. Worthy was the fastest big man in the league. He could outrun guards on the break. For Wedman, who was known for strength and positioning rather than elite foot speed, Worthy was a schematic nightmare. Guarding Worthy meant sprinting back on defense on every single possession. If you jogged for even a second, Worthy dunked. This physical demand creates a deep resentment. It is exhausting. In the 1984 finals, Wedman won a ring, but the series was a grueling 7-game war played in immense heat. Worthy was a constant problem, slashing through the Celtics defense. Then came May 27, 1985, Game 1 of the NBA Finals, the Memorial Day Massacre. Scott Wedman came off the bench and played the game of his life. He went 11 for 11 from the field. 11 for 11. He was 4 for 4 from three-point range. He finished with 26 points in just 23 minutes. Meanwhile, James Worthy scored 20 points but shot 8 for 19 from the field. Wedman did not just beat Worthy, he humiliated the Lakers' defense. This performance was cathartic. For a bench player to outscore the opposing team's star forward while not missing a single shot is the ultimate triumph. The hate Wedman felt for Worthy, born of fear of his speed, was exercised in a barrage of perfect jumpers. This game also represented something deeper. Worthy represented the Showtime style. Flashy, fast, Hollywood. Wedman and the Celtics represented the slogging, physical, East Coast style. It was a clash of civilizations. The Lakers played in the Forum with celebrities courtside. The Celtics played in the Boston Garden with no air conditioning. Wedman's perfect shooting performance in that oppressive heat was no accident. While the Lakers were gasping for air, Wedman was fresh. His superior conditioning, built on his vegetarian diet and relentless training, gave him an edge. He hated his rivals enough to radically alter his lifestyle to beat them. The 11 for 11 performance was more than just a hot shooting night. It was vindication. It was proof that all the hate, all the preparation, all the abuse from Bird in practice, all the physical beatings from Malone, all the embarrassment from Irving's dunks, it all meant something. Wedman had turned suffering into art. Every jumper that swished through the net was an answer to every insult, every bruise, every moment of doubt. That is what hate can do when you channel it correctly. So what does all of this hate actually mean? It is not jealousy. It is not pettiness. Wedman did not hate these men as individuals. He became close with Bird. He spoke with reverence about the others. What he hated was what they represented, the absolute limit of his own abilities. They were the bar he had to clear every single night. He hated Bird because Bird forced him to run until his lungs burned. He hated Malone because Malone left him bruised and battered. He hated Irving, Johnson, and Wilkes because they required perfect mental focus to stop. He hated Worthy because Worthy stood between him and a championship. But here is the twist. This hate was not destructive. It was functional. It was fuel. Wedman used this hate to become better. He lifted heavier weights than anyone else. He stuck to his vegetarian diet despite the ridicule from Bird and McHale. He refined his jump shot until he could hit 11 in a row in the NBA Finals. The hate pushed him to change his body, his diet, and his mentality. It forced him into championship-level preparation. Think about what that actually means. Wedman was already an all-star when he arrived in Boston. He already had the skills. He already had the resume. But the hate revealed something deeper. It showed him that being good was not enough. Not in the 80s. Not against these players. Being good meant you survived. Being great meant you conquered. The hate was a mirror that reflected his own limitations back at him. Every time Bird embarrassed him in practice, Wedman saw what he was not yet capable of. Every time Malone pushed him around in the paint, Wedman understood he needed to be stronger. Every time Wilkes hit another impossible shot, Wedman learned that mental toughness mattered more than physical tools. Without these 5 players torturing him, Wedman never becomes a 2-time champion. Without Bird breaking him down in practice every single day, Wedman never earns his trust. Without Moses Malone physically dominating him in 1981, Wedman never builds the strength to survive the Celtics grind. Without Irving, Johnson, and Wilkes forcing him to be perfect on every possession, Wedman never develops the mental toughness to come off the bench in the finals and go 11 for 11. Scott Wedman's career is often summarized as a reserve on the great Celtics teams, but his hate list reveals the truth. He was a gladiator who survived the arena by studying, respecting, and ultimately conquering the most dangerous opponents of his time. When he says he welcomed the challenge, he is really saying he embraced the hate and used it to become a champion. In the 1980s, hate was not a weakness. It was the currency of respect. You did not hate someone unless they were worth hating, and these 5 legends plus Larry Bird were absolutely worth it. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the psychology of rivalry, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. Comment below and tell me, Which rivalry from the 80s do you want us to cover next? Was it the Celtics and Lakers? The Bad Boy Pistons? Or something deeper that nobody talks about? Let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.